The idea that America throws away shipping containers from China sounds dramatic, but the reality is more complex. The United States does not literally dump large numbers of Chinese containers into the ocean or destroy them randomly. Instead, the issue revolves around trade imbalance, container economics, logistics costs, and supply chain disruptions. To understand what really happens, we need to look at global trade patterns, container ownership, and the economic forces connecting countries like the United States and China. 1. The trade imbalance problem. One of the biggest reasons containers pile up in America is the long-standing trade imbalance between the United States and China. For decades, the United States has imported far more goods from China than it exports back. American consumers buy massive amounts of Chinese-made products, electronics, clothing, furniture, machinery, and household goods. Meanwhile, U.S. exports to China, while significant, such as soybeans, aircraft parts, and natural gas, are not equal in volume to imports. This imbalance means millions of containers arrive full in U.S. ports. Fewer containers leave the U.S. filled with export goods. Large numbers of empty containers accumulate. When exports cannot fill containers quickly enough, shipping companies face a choice. Leave containers sitting in U.S. storage yards. Send them back empty to China. Sell or scrap older containers if repositioning is too expensive. This situation can give the impression that America is throwing away containers, but it is mostly about repositioning and cost efficiency. 2. Who actually owns the containers? Most shipping containers are not owned by governments. They are owned by shipping companies like Maersk, container leasing firms, logistics corporations. These companies make decisions based on profit, not politics. If it costs more to store, transport, or reposition a container than its remaining value, companies may sell it locally, scrap it for metal, convert it into storage units, repurpose it into housing or construction projects. So when containers are thrown away, it's usually a private business decision, not a U.S. government policy. 3. The cost of moving empty containers. Shipping a container across the Pacific is expensive. Fuel, port fees, labor, and ship space all cost money. Sometimes it's cheaper for a company to abandon an old container, scrap it for steel, sell it at a discount locally. Why? Because empty containers generate no revenue. They take up space on cargo ships that could otherwise carry paying cargo. In periods of high demands, such as during the COVID-19 pandemic, shipping companies urgently needed empty containers back in China to load exports. During that time, instead of throwing them away, companies rushed to return them as quickly as possible. But in normal times, when container prices are low and surplus is high, older containers may not be worth repositioning. 4. Port congestion and storage overflow. Major American ports like Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, receive enormous volumes of cargo from China. When imports surge, ports become congested. Containers stack up in yards. Trucking shortages slow movement inland. If containers sit too long, companies incur storage penalties. In some cases, damaged or outdated containers are scrapped instead of stored indefinitely. But this is about logistics inefficiency, not about America deliberately discarding Chinese containers. 5. Container lifespan and wear. Shipping containers are not permanent assets. Most have a working lifespan of about 10 to 15 years in active ocean service. After years at sea, they suffer. Rust, structural damage, door malfunctions, floor deterioration. When a container reaches the end of its marine life, companies decide whether to refurbish it, convert it for land storage, sell it, scrap it. Scrapping happens everywhere in the world, not just in America. It's part of the normal life cycle of global shipping equipment. 6. Pandemic disruptions and misunderstandings during the COVID-19 pandemic 2020-2022. Global supply chains were severely disrupted. Factories in China closed temporarily. Then, when they reopened, demand from American consumers surged. Stimulus spending and online shopping led to record imports. This caused shortages of empty containers in China, surpluses of containers stuck inland in America, shipping rates to skyrocket. At one point, container shipping costs from China to the US were more than 5 times higher than normal. Instead of throwing containers away, companies scrambled to retrieve empty containers from the US and send them back to China as quickly as possible, even if they were empty because the profits from Chinese exports were so high. So the pandemic actually showed the opposite. Containers were extremely valuable. 7. Recycling and secondary markets. When containers are retired, they often enter secondary markets. In the United States, old shipping containers are used for construction site storage, pop-up shops, emergency housing, modular homes, farms, and ranch storage. Restaurants built from containers. Entire architectural trends have developed around container reuse. In fact, in cities across America, you can find creative container projects rather than discarded waste. 8. Steel value and scrapping economics. Shipping containers are made mostly of corten steel, a durable, corrosion-resistant metal. When global steel prices are high, scrapping containers can be profitable. Companies may dismantle older units and sell the steel. This practice happens worldwide, not specifically because they came from China. Scrapping is simply part of asset depreciation management. 9. Trade policy and tariffs. Some people assume trade wars caused containers to be discarded. During the US-China trade tensions under President Donald Trump, tariffs were imposed on many Chinese goods. However, imports continued. Container traffic remained strong. There was no mass policy of container destruction. Tariffs affected prices and sourcing patterns, but they did not lead to systematic disposal of containers. 10. Environmental concerns. There are environmental regulations governing disposal of shipping containers in the United States. Companies cannot simply dump containers into landfills without following federal environmental laws, state recycling rules. Scrap metal regulations. Improper disposal would lead to heavy fines. So the image of America throwing away containers in large numbers is not supported by evidence. 11. The bigger economic reality. The core reason containers sometimes appear abandoned in America is this: the global trade system is unbalanced. China produces enormous quantities of manufactured goods for export. The United States consumes them. As long as imports greatly exceed exports, containers will accumulate. Repositioning costs will exist. Some containers will be sold or scrapped locally. But this is a structural feature of global capitalism, not a deliberate act of waste. 12. Are containers ever abandoned? In rare cases, containers may be seized due to unpaid fees. Abandoned due to bankruptcy of shipping companies. Left in storage yards after disputes. When that happens, port authorities may auction or scrap them. However, this represents a tiny fraction of total container volume. 13. What actually happens to most containers? Most containers that arrive in America from China, deliver goods, are emptied, are sent inland or stored temporarily, eventually refilled with US exports or sent back empty to Asia. The majority are reused many times before retirement. 14. Why the myth exists. The belief that America throws away containers likely comes from photos of stacked empty containers at ports, news reports about supply chain chaos, social media exaggeration, misunderstanding of global logistics. Seeing thousands of containers stacked high can look like waste, but in reality, they are assets waiting for repositioning. 15. The economics in simple terms. Imagine this. China sends 100 containers of goods to America. America only has enough exports to fill 40 containers. 60 containers are empty. Shipping companies must decide. Store them. Send them back empty. Sell some. Scrap the oldest ones. None of these actions mean America is throwing away Chinese property. They are commercial decisions. 16. The future of container trade. As global supply chains evolve, companies are diversifying production to countries like Vietnam and India. Nearshoring to Mexico is increasing. Automation is improving container tracking. But as long as the United States remains a major consumer market and China remains a major exporter, container imbalances will continue. Final conclusion: America does not deliberately throw away shipping containers from China. What happens is, trade imbalance creates container surpluses. Shipping companies manage assets based on cost. Older containers are sometimes scrapped or sold. Most containers are reused many times. Disposal follows economic logic, not political hostility. The issue is not about waste, it is about global trade dynamics between two economic giants, the United States and China.